Now that we're okay, we can get going. Ready, guys? Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Winnetka Village Council regular meeting for January 21st, 2020. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask that everyone in the room please turn off or mute your cell phones or other electronic devices, including me. And I'd like to ask Trustee Kripe to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Rob, you want to go ahead and check quorum, please?
Sure. Checking the February meetings. Does anybody have a conflict for February? Should be good. The 4th, 11th, and the 18th.
Yeah, I don't have the rest.
The 18th?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, so let us know. Okay. Everybody else okay then? Yep. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment. This is the time of the evening where any members of the audience who wish to address Village Council on any item that is not on the agenda, you're welcome to come on up to the microphone, let us know who you are, and share your thoughts with us. Does anybody in the audience wish to address council on items that are not on the agenda? Come on up, Ron.
Well, I'd like to thank the village for taking my old friend, Dr. Clarence Minima's face off, out of the, the brick installation at the corner of Elm and Chestnut Street. I learned a lot from Dr. Minima because he failed. He would routinely would fail each person who came forward to take the Boy Scouts first aid badge. And there's good reason for that, because when we came back to retest, we knew our stuff. And a couple of times in my life, it put me into it gave me situations which I could handle. What you have today at the corner of Elm and Chestnut are barricades to pedestrian safety. Stanchions without catenary chains I look at them, I see a barrier to a pedestrian crossing the street. You have change in access on the motorway, and you've put in planters that are a hazard to vehicles and pedestrians. In engineering school, we had a short course on civil engineering, public safety, road design, sort of tangential, see what the civil engineer would do. And, within 20, 30 feet of an intersection, you're not supposed to have anything, except maybe a stop sign. Otherwise, you hang the traffic signals overhead. The various barriers that you've been installing now, they're hazard to bicycles, hazard to pedestrians, and make it more difficult to snow removal. And then you have further up east on Elm Street, you have parking new benches, very high-end stuff. But with kids coming back from school, they park their bicycles, leave them hazardly, randomly, on the pedestrian walkway, sidewalks, which makes it more difficult for people walking over back and forth in the bank. I think you'd better ask the vendors if they will take back some of that high-end fancy equipment that they've been buying. But it's just, in my opinion, which is shared by a few people, I think, but I think it's worth making a comment about. I yield back my time.
Thanks, Ron. Would anybody else like to address council this evening? Non-agenda items. Seeing none, I will close public comment and move on with reports. First of all, trustees, Penny, we'll start with you. John?
No report?
Andy? No report. Jack? No report. Okay. Village attorney?
No report tonight.
Village manager?
No report.
And village president. I do have a couple things. I jotted them down so I wouldn't forget them. Okay, last week on Wednesday, I shared the floor with Arnold Randall and Chris Slattery from the Cook County Forest Preserve District. They spoke of some of their projected improvements and some visions for Skokie Lagoons, including the proposed Boathouse, which I also shared some thoughts on that. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the Boathouse was kind of an adjunct to our MOU in which the village agreed to work closely with the Forest Preserve and try to identify private funding sources for a new facility over there on Tower Road. So they shared some of those concepts and the results of what their planners had done, and there was some really good discussion about that. On Thursday, the village team actually presented to the Winnetka Park District our vision for the stormwater improvements that would be housed on Park District property, both at Little Duke, the 9-hole golf course, and the 18-hole golf course. There were several members of the community at that meeting, and we fielded some really good questions, and I think we had a great conversation. Overall, it seems as though that project was fairly well received by that particular board. And thirdly, I just wanted to give a shout out to Steve Saunders and his team. You know, that we had a really nasty snow event this weekend. Maybe not, it wasn't the biggest snow event, but the changing weather from snow to rain to freezing weather. And Steve's guys got out there right away and did a great job of getting a first pass on the walks before all that stuff froze and really made it, making it difficult to walk in the community. So Steve, thanks again. Send the best to your guys. That was a sort of extra effort that I think everybody in the community really appreciated. And that's mine. Okay, approval of the agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item on the consent agenda for a separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Item 7, the consent agenda. I'll ask the village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the village council meeting minutes for January 7th, 2020, regular meeting. Approval of the warrant list dated December 3rd through the 16th, 2020. Excuse me. Bear with me. January 3rd through the 16th, 2020, in the amount of $1,051,249.64, and resolution number R8, 2020, purchase of a sewer camera and transporter.
Thanks, Rob. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So
Roll call vote?
Trustee Caladarchi?
Aye.
Trustee Lanfair? Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Kripe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Item 8, ordinances and resolutions. 8A, ordinance number M3, 2020, authorizing the disposition of surplus personal property owned by the Village of Winnetka. This is up for introduction, possible adoption, pending trustee consent on that item. Each year, council approval is needed to dispose of obsolete village property. This year, 2 vehicles are also included in the disposal list. There's also a lot of good stuff that I'm really a little upset about, the fact that I can't participate in the auction, but anyway. Here to review this. The chipper and that tractor, I still want to take a look at that. Here to review is Water and Electric Director Brian Keys.
Good evening. Thanks for the introduction, President Rentz. As noted, on an annual basis, the departments put together a list of items that have served their useful life with the village, not capable of reuse or no longer useful. The complete listing is on page 17 of the agenda packet, but does include a brush chipper, some portable pumps, an old welder, file cabinets, and aluminum can crusher, and 2 vehicles. I will note that the 1 vehicle served 2 lives with the village. One is a police car, and now being retired from Public Works is a backup fleet car for pool use. In addition to that, the ordinance gives the village manager approval to dispose of other equipment throughout the year, and specific to water and electric, we end up with failed electrical equipment such as cable, transformers, old meters. These are recycled or put out bids for basically for reuse of this equipment for like the transformers or the repair of them. And then under a state statute, property gained by the police department that they're unable to return to its owner, it's either abandoned, lost, stolen, or illegally possessed, is also disposed of during the course of the year. I think that's things like bicycles. So with your concurrence, we'd ask approval. It is set up as mentioned, where you could elect to introduce and adopt it tonight, or you could solely introduce it and have an opportunity to revisit it again for adoption in a subsequent meeting. I'd be happy to take any questions, and most of the internal stakeholders are here tonight, so you can ask any question you want.
Any questions for Brian?
No, I'd like to see it go intro and adopt.
Okay.
Just
Jack?
one question for Chief. A lot of radios disappearing out of the fire department. I was just curious, there were, I think, 40 at least. I'm just curious why so many is it just,
Those radios have been around for decades. They're no longer serviceable by Motorola, and we just kept them.
oh, you're just holding on, so, yeah.
Yeah, so you can't get parts for them. They're just not repairable, so it's just going through the process now.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Brian, if somebody's interested in bidding on the items, how would they go about doing
Good
that?
question. So the vehicles, the brush chipper, are going to go on an online bidding auction called Biddergy. I think the police department uses online, I think it's called propertyroom.com. And the radios, I think my understanding is the fire department's going to try to find another fire department that may be of interest, but highly likely they're going to end up in some type of electronics recycling program.
Great.
But so the items that you're interested in, Biddergy, it's an online bidding site, and it's been very successful, and it's very low staff involvement to get it to go.
Well, regretfully, my high-paying job prohibits me from participating in those events, so I'll just stand on the sidelines and watch. Or maybe I'll get my daughter to bid on something. I don't know. Okay. What is the thought here on waiving introduction? Okay, somebody want to make a motion on that?
Make a motion to waive introduction?
Yes, waive introduction of ordinance number M3, 2020. Roll call vote?
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier? Trustee Caladarchi?
Yes.
Trustee Kreip?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Now, I'll move forward, and may I have a motion to adopt ordinance number M3, 2020?
So moved?
Second?
Roll call vote?
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Caladarchi?
Yes.
Trustee Kreip?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier?
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item B, resolution number R5, 2020, waiving the bidding process and entering into a contract with Andreas for medical billing service, and this is up for adoption. The village's current contract for medical billing services is up for renewal. And here to review the new agreement is Fire Chief Alan Burkowski.
Good evening.
Hi.
If anybody wants a radio, just let me know, and I'd be happy to pull one off for you. So what you have in front of you tonight is a resolution to continue our relationship with Andres Medical Building at a new lower rate. If you recall, back in October during the budget presentations, I had a goal to participate in a joint RFP with multiple fire departments. Well, the lead fire department renegotiated their contract with Andres and pulled out of the RFP, which kind of killed the RFP. We then reached out to Andres and negotiated with them, and they reduced our rate from 6% to 4%. I would have been thrilled if we went out to an RFP and got the 4%. So I'm really excited about this, considering we have a real low call volume. So I am requesting approval of this resolution to maintain our excellent customer service we receive from Andres at this great new low rate.
Awesome.
Question?
Any questions for Chief Burkowski?
I like the reduction.
Me too.
Great. Any public comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back up. Final thoughts? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adopt resolution number R5 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Kreip?
Yes.
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier? Trustee Caladarchi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, moving forward, item C, resolution number R6 2020. This is contract amendment for streetscape improvement project for adoption. The Phase 2 streetscape project will be completed this year. Village staff is recommending extending the Phase 1 contract with the current contractor to complete the next round of improvements. Here to review is Assistant Public Works Director Jim Bernal.
Thank you, President Ernst. My apologies for the scratchy voice. Hockey weekend, yelling at kids. Good evening. As part of the village's commitment to implementing the overall streetscape improvements, excuse me, the village has budgeted funds to begin the second phase of the streetscape project. Phase 2 of the project will be on Elm Street, and the scope of this will be between Green Bay Road and Birch Road. Using the lessons learned from Phase 1 project, it's the desire of the village to begin construction on the next phase as soon as we possibly can in 2020. As weather permits, in early spring is what we're really kind of shooting for, and having the project wrapped up by early summer. That's our goal. Staff has been working with the engineering and landscaping consultants that we have to finalize the construction plans and specifications for the next phase. Acknowledging the desire to begin construction as quickly as possible, staff discussed the option of extending the contract with ALAMP, the current contractor, which is ALAMP Concrete Contractors out of Schaumburg, Illinois. The extension of the existing contract would offer positives for completing the next phase of construction. First, the village did receive very favorable numbers from ALAMP Concrete when we let this project in June of 2019. So the contractors agreed to hold those prices as we move forward. So with that, we would see quite a savings. The existing contractor has the advantage of understanding the village's expectation, is familiar with all the business owners and all the key players. So eliminating that learning curve would help make this project move a lot smoother. The existing contractor will already be returning in the spring to complete the final landscaping and also the resurfacing of the public parking lot. So sequencing the two projects together should be a lot more seamless and make it easier for everybody. The existing contractor and the electrical subcontractor are familiar with the new infrastructure, so their familiarity with where to pick up and what's existing there now would be a benefit for us. By authorizing the amendment before you to the existing contract, the village would also remove the lengthy process of bidding, reviewing, and awarding a new contract, which could add to the overall time of the project and the commencement time. So again, being sensitive to trying to get this work done as quickly as we can is very important to us. In addition, the village may not receive some favorable numbers as we did in 2019. As we've seen the trend upward is that the contract prices typically do go up every single year. So maintaining those prices is a benefit for us. The contractor overall did perform well during the first phase of the contract. Staff believes that with the new proposed scope, which we believe is in their wheelhouse, they'll continue to do a good job for us in the next phase. Utilizing the bid numbers provided by ALAMP from the first phase, which is Phase 1, we've been working with our engineering consultant, and they've updated the new cost estimate for it for a new total of $723,235 is estimated for this next phase. The village has budgeted $1,018,000 in this year's budget for the completion of the Elm Street streetscape project. By amending the existing contract, the village overall will save about $295,000, a little bit less than that, which is a good savings overall. For these reasons, staff is recommending that the council consider adopting Resolution R6 2020, amending the existing contract with ALAMP Concrete Contractors to include this new work in the construction services. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you got.
Any questions from Jim from the trustees?
Yeah, one question I have probably for Peter more is that amending the existing contract to add a new phase doesn't require bidding at all for the second phase of work?
No, because you're waiving competitive bidding.
And that's okay?
Yep.
Okay, great, good. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Does anybody have any comments or questions that they haven't already shared with us on this? Come on up. By the way, while you're coming up, Ron, I will address one thing. We are going to have a series of meetings prior to the implementation of Phase 2, and I'll be sure that you're kept up to date on when those meetings are occurring, if you wish to poke your head in and share your 2 cents worth. You're welcome.
Hi, good evening. My question is related to the projection that you see on the savings. First of all, you had indicated that the...
Well, could you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry. My name's Vince D'Amico. I live 475 Poplar Street. So I was just curious, did you get any kind of a follow-up bid? You had indicated that the contractor was willing to hold on his previous contract number. Did you get any other proposals or bids that can quantify the difference?
So when this project was bid last year in June of 2019,
Microphone, Jim.
oh, sorry, if I can talk this way, I'll talk this way. When this project was bid in June of 2019, we received a total of about 5 bids, I believe, total, which was the competitive bidding process. It was out for numerous weeks. We reviewed that. The current contractor, which was A-Lamp Concrete Contractor, offered the lowest pricing and actually a substantial price for the contract. By the contractor holding those unit prices, we were able to just carry that forward into this year. Typically, on average, as construction commences from year to year, you typically see between 3 to 5% increase in prices year to year. So by receiving those favorable numbers and maintaining, we take that chance away. So that's how we get.
Construction costs have gone up.
They have,
quite a bit.
substantially, yeah, and for materials as well.
So one last question. Regarding the Elm Street redevelopment, when is that to start? What, are you taking into account that one Winnetka might be tearing up that whole area, so why do any? I was just asking if there was consideration given to the fact on the Elm Street development or redevelopment of the streetscape, has it been taken into consideration that the south side of that street is going to get all torn up with one Winnetka? So are you, budgeting or, positioning where you're going to do the development to avoid the construction while that's potentially being built up?
Yeah, and I can speak to that, Ben. Phase 2 is from Green Bay to Birch. So we won't be going over to the east side until, I believe, at least the current projections are 2021. And obviously, if something does happen at one Winnetka, or whatever the site ends up being called, we'll have to coordinate with that to make sure we aren't doing things twice.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Thank you for your time. Sure.
Thanks. Thanks for coming out. Any other comments? Nope. Come on up. Oh, hi, Julie. It's a great hat.
Oh, thank you. Julie Windsor. I own Beat Street on the other side of town, but I also live on 1479 Tower Road. I feel the streetscape has really hurt the retail district a lot, and it scares me. It scares me because if we have more hits to the foot traffic, it makes these businesses go out. They're all hanging on an edge, and the edge is hurt by construction. So we have to keep this in our thoughts as we keep having more construction. First replace the bricks, then replace them again. Now put in lighting, which is beautiful, but the problem is it's boom, boom, boom. And the customer says, I can't park, so I'm just gonna go online. I can't get in that store, I'm just gonna go online. And next thing you know, they're just going online and they're not even trying to come to our commercial district, which might be beautiful when we're done, but it also might be empty of every single business that is now in those spaces. I just want you to think about it. I know we have the money, I know we're gonna make it look beautiful, but there may be no stores left by the time we finish. So please keep that in your thoughts. Do you
Thanks,
have any
Julie.
questions for me?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, bring it back up here. Any additional thoughts on Jim's proposal?
No, I think it's a good program, and I'm glad they could work it out with A-Lamp.
Yeah, it's a significant savings over the budget. I'm really pleased to see that. And rest assured, Julie and other vendors, we learned, this is a learning process for village staff and the contractor as well. And there's a lot of things that came out of that first phase that are going to be built upon. And, we are going to continue a very active communication involvement with all of the vendors and try to address specific needs as they're cited, and do the best we can and make it as quick as possible. One good example is last year, we actually thought that starting in the fall would be a good thing because we could be done before the holiday shopping season, et cetera. And, we found out from the vendors that there's a little bit of a bump in that post-Labor Day period that wasn't shared with us previously. And so this year, we're trying to get it done in the early spring, leading up to the summer, so that by the time the construction is done, the community will be able to enjoy the new improvements throughout the summer, and it won't inhibit any of the other activities. So we're trying to learn from this and get better as we go. And, trust me, Jim heard from me way too many times this last time, so I know that there's going to be some adjustments made. And I think the folks at A-Lamp also learned a lot about the community and started to build some bonds with the business community, so they're better communicators as to the day-to-day happenings as well. Certainly it's a project that needs to happen if we're going to stay vital and vibrant, and we're all very well aware of the dynamics out there. So that's that. All right, well, with nothing else, I'll go ahead and ask for a motion to adopt, where are we now? Resolution number R6, 2020.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote.
Trustee Kripe?
Yes.
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier? Trustee Caladarchi?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thanks, guys. We got all sorts of resolutions tonight. Item D, resolution number R7, 2020, purchase of pedestrian lighting fixtures. Phase 2 streetscape project includes the placement of improved pedestrian lighting. These are street lights. Since there is a long lead time item of the manufacture of the specified light fixture, staff is asking for approval to purchase the lights directly from the supplier in advance of starting Phase 2 construction. And Jim will give us a quick overview on this.
Yes. Thank you, President Ritz. I think you explained it pretty close. Similar to last year's project, we pre-ordered certain types of materials, the lighting controller, which has a long lead time, and these Sternberg pedestrian lights. There is a sole source vendor which supplies that in our region. That's KSA Lighting and Control. We received a bid from them for a total of $47,985. That was to purchase the lights for the next part within the limits of the next streetscape project. Because there is a 10 to 12 week lead time on those lights, staff is requesting to move forward with the purchase so we have them ready to go when we start construction.
Yeah. Good idea. Any comments, questions from?
Yeah, I have one question.
Sure.
I don't think there's any more lighted bollards on the second phase, right?
There are no lighted bollards on this next phase.
Okay. So now just a question kind of off topic a little bit. There was an email that came out today, I think maybe Penny even wrote it. On those lighted bollards are there, are they dimmable?
They are not dimmable. There's a one set LED on there.
Yeah, just
we talked to
extremely
Utility
bright.
Dynamic about that.
And
Can you lamp them down?
We've talked about that. They're looking at talking to Sternberg, because those are Sternberg LED lit bollards, to see what we can do to potentially modify the lights so they're more accent light and dim them down a little bit. I'll get an answer for that.
I
Great.
know it's off topic a little bit, but thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Any comments from the audience on this particular item? Come on up.
Nancy Fox, 1036L. My only comment is the brightness. I don't like bright lights, and I like dim, as you suggested, Chris. And if you don't have a dimmer, maybe a lesser of a bulb, something. But if we overlight the town, I don't think people will be happy. And we won't see, we don't see the stars anyway, do we? But I think aesthetically, we have to pay attention to the wattage. Thank you.
I agree. Interesting fact that I heard the other night. The night sky, typically you can see 4,500 stars if you're in a dark area. In Chicagoland, we can see a total of 35 stars. So that shows you a little bit about how invasive light pollution is.
And there's a movement across the country about that.
Yeah.
Can't really talk about it because I don't know about it, but yeah, people are concerned. And they're turning their lights off in the rural areas just for that reason.
Great. Well, thanks, Nancy. Any other comments? We'll bring it back up here. Any other thoughts? Seeing none, we're all just chomping at the bit here. May I have a motion to adopt resolution number R7 2020?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote.
Trustee Kreip? Yes. Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier? Trustee Caladarchi?
Peter wanted to jump in on something.
So on all these that you've been waiving competitive bidding, the code requires 2/3 of trustees, so you have 2/3, 4 is enough. I didn't announce that, but it's all set forth in the resolution.
Okay.
With regard to waiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since we have a vacancy, does that,
2/3 of 6,
Of the six.
4, so you've got
Right,
4.
right,
Learn something new every day. Okay, item number 10, new business. Oh, actually, item number 9, old business, there is none. Item 10, new business. Item A, 714 to 740 Elm Street, and 511 to 515 Lincoln. CA Residential LLC Plan Development Revised Concept Review, Plan Review.
I'm going to step away now.
Oh,
Good luck, everybody.
oh, gee, Andy,
Just
trustee
dwindling here.
Kripe must recuse himself due to business interests, correct?
CA Ventures is a client of my firm.
Gotcha. Thank you, Andy. Yep. Okay, the village has received an amended plan development concept review application from CA Residential LLC. Their concept plan review in November was found by the public and council to be too bulky, too dense, and out of character with its surrounding. Tonight, the council and audience will hear 2 revised concept proposals for the site and provide feedback to the applicants. So the way this is going to work is David is going to give us an overview. We'll then let CA come up and do their presentation. Then we'll go to questions from the council. We'll then go to, questions from the council. We'll then go to comments from the audience. We'll then go to comments from the council, and then provide any final recommendations to hopefully enlighten the folks at CA. So David, go ahead and take it away.
Good evening. So for the members of the public, just wanted to reiterate what Village President Rentz said. Tonight is the concept plan review stage. The council will not be voting on this tonight. This stage allows an applicant to provide their concept for a plan development, and trustees will provide their individual comments on the development. There's no binding decision made this evening. If, after hearing your comments this evening, the applicant would determine whether or not they wanted to proceed with the next stage, which would be the preliminary plan application. At that stage, there would be much more information provided by the applicant. And when the application is ready for review, there would be public hearings set before the Plan Development Commission and the Design Review Board that the public would be informed of. Notices would be sent out for that. And then those 2 advisory bodies would make a recommendation to the Village Council. So I just wanted to let the public know that if the applicant should decide to proceed after this evening, there will be opportunities for them to participate in the process further. So the site's located on the southeast corner of Elm and Lincoln. Currently has 5 unoccupied buildings and then 1 that's occupied by Connie's. This proposal this evening does not include using any part of the village parcel. The parking lot to the east. Some One Winnetka development and a previous proposal did, but this evening's does not include using the village parcel. The current zoning is C2 in the overlay district, which is consistent with the village's comprehensive plan that designates the site appropriate for mixed-use land uses. As a reminder, the village council had approved a 58-unit development on the site. That project did not move forward, and the village council then rescinded those approvals for the property. CAA Ventures had previously submitted 2 options. The one that included just the subject property had 135 rental units, 19,000 square feet of commercial space, and 156 on-site parking spaces. This evening, which we're referring to as option 4 in the applicant's materials, has 90 units for 15,500 square feet and and 158 on-site parking spaces. I'm just going to quickly go over zoning relief and subdivision relief as necessary, and I'll let the applicant elaborate on their proposal. Given that the parcel consists of a number of individual lots, there would need to be a plat of consolidation. Along with that, we have a subdivision exception that would need to be granted because this new lot that is being created would have a rear line abutting a side lot line to the property to the east. It would need a exception for that. In terms of zoning relief, as proposed in option 4, the only zoning relief would be the rear yard setback on the east property line. The east property line on this lot is considered the rear yard, and the minimum requirement is 10 feet, and the applicant is showing something less than 10 feet. Just though they don't need any relief on parking, I just wanted to note that they do meet our parking requirements for the multifamily and then the commercial, given the configuration of the retail space is not required to provide parking. So their provided parking is 158 compared to their required parking of 132. If the applicant should move forward, we will have to have discussions with them about off-site parking, as we did with the One Winnetka site, in terms of how we may assign those parking spaces. Based upon their proposed plan, we would need to look at how we would assign those parking spaces in the area. The applicant is proposing a structure that would meet, as currently designed, the maximum height. And option 4 would also meet the upper story step back requirement of 10 feet on the 4th story. The applicant has presented an alternate design, which they believe from an aesthetic perspective is more attractive, and I'll let them elaborate on it. But on the 4th story, these elements, the clock tower and these elements along the side, are actually within that 10-foot step back requirement area. So option 4, the alternate, would require some relief to be granted for that. In the materials, as part of our plan development requirements, the applicant has indicated they'll work with the village on providing whatever utilities are needed to serve the development and to install streetscape elements consistent with the village's plan. So we would, if they move forward, would need to work with them on incorporating those into their plans. So this is a summary of what would need village council approval in addition to a plan development. approval. They would need a plat of consolidation and then a rear yard setback for the east property line. And if they would pursue the alternate, they would need an upper story step back exception.
I want to stop you right there
That,
because I want to make it clear that we are not contemplating any approvals at this meeting, and that you're just providing us this information for potential future conversation if the project elects to go ahead.
correct.
Okay. Thanks.
And that concludes my presentation.
Oh, thanks, David. Okay, well, I think we'll have the developer come on up and share in a little greater detail their proposed improvements and hear what you have to say about this.
Good evening, all. My name is Joshua Sachs. I'm with Majewski Architects. John Majewski could not be here tonight, so I'm here in his place, and I'm happy to present the project and look forward to your feedback. I'm here with Ryan Sadawi, who's with CA Ventures on the developer side of the project. I'm not going to talk too much about the site or the history because I believe everyone is well aware of the site and the background of the development team. So as David pointed out, really we're here tonight kind of with a reconceptualization of the project based on your feedback and feedback with the neighbors, and really kind of taking that to heart and seeing what we can do to improve the project and make it more cohesive with the neighborhood and palatable to the community, and something hopefully that people could look at and be proud of, as a building, as a structure that's part of the neighborhood and fits in with the context of the surrounding area. So as David alluded to, the big thing we did is we reduced the scale of the project. So we presented previously a 5-story proposal. Some elements went straight vertical, so the street wall was 5 stories. So, we really try to take the underlying zoning and massing and kind of embrace that. So we removed a story of the building, so we're 4 stories, and as David alluded to, we're within the 45-foot maximum height and the 4 stories maximum structure. So as a result, we reduced the unit count by 1/3, so went from 135 units to 90 units. I know the density of the site was a big concern. And also parking was a concern, so although we reduced 1/3 of the units, we actually slightly improved upon the parking count. So we went from 156 to 158. So we're about 1.76 spaces per unit, which is substantially higher than what CA typically does for kind of more of a transit-oriented development type of project that has train station nearby and it's a walkable urban area. So from that standpoint, we hope that that's more palatable. We think that from an urban scale and pedestrian experience, it's a much more enjoyable experience, only having 3 stories of street wall and stepping back the 4th floor. So we think that's a big improvement. We also think the vernacular needed to change to fit in more with Winnetka and kind of what we see in the area. So we embraced more of a Tudor vocabulary, introducing a lot of stucco and timber elements, stone base with a lot of brick. Really try to open up the ground floor with large expanses of storefront, trying to make retail viable in a difficult time to make retail viable. And like I said, we're truly trying to conform to the underlying zoning. So the only exception right now that we're looking for is to reduce the rear yard setback along the east property line. And I didn't partake in these discussions, but I know John Majewski met with residents of the condo association to the south at 711 Oak. And he also met with the Hadley Institute last week to present the project and get their feedback. So, just a couple of views of the project and the reduced scale and the revised design. We think, as I mentioned, this is really the language of it really kind of is more harmonious with the neighborhood, and obviously the the village has certain design guidelines, and English tutor is obviously one of the strong emphasis in the village guidelines, so we took that to heart as well. In terms of materiality, like I mentioned, we're assuming like a limestone clad base with aluminum storefront. The second and third floors would have stucco and timber and masonry with punched openings with simulated divided lights in the glass. And then the top floor, that step back, would have a standing seam roof and then copper-clad dormer elements. The plan is very similar to the previous approach in terms of how we line the retail, and with our surface parking, we access the site from the south, and we have a 25-foot setback on the south property line to access the site, and we have a loading space on the southwest corner off of Lincoln. Our basement has 118 spaces. And then as you work your way up the building, it's multifamily, so we have a U-shaped courtyard with an amenity element in the middle. And then really when you get up to the fourth floor, the building steps back on three fronts to get the 10-foot required setback. As David showed, we were complying with the 4-story, 45-foot maximum height in our sections. And in elevation, it could be difficult with a multifamily building trying to break up the mass. And, we think we were able to manipulate the plan and the elevations to really give the facade, to break up the facade, to reduce the scale of it. And I think a pure elevation is never a true representation of how a building is perceived. So sometimes elevations could look heavier than perhaps they are in real life when you're experiencing a building from the street level. Also, we're presenting an additional option, and that is the option with additional elements. So we think with the architecture presented, a stronger corner tower element is more appropriate to kind of hold that corner. In the base option 4 scheme, it kind of looks slightly cut off, and we think kind of pronouncing that corner is beneficial. Additionally, the gable elements at the end where we have the timbers, we brought those out to the street front because once again, we feel to hold ourselves to the 45-foot, the building again looks cut off and it doesn't look like it completes itself at the top. So that's really the presentation and the redesign, and I'm here to answer any questions or comments you guys have.
Sure. Does a representative from CA have anything to add to this?
Not at this time. I'm just really fact-finding right now and just trying to download all the information that we hear tonight.
Great. Thank you. Okay, questions from members of the council? You're off, Penny.
Oh, it's off, Red's on. Sorry, got it all, like my life, it's all backwards. Looking at these elevations, I like the approach taken on the east exterior with all the plantings and softening that up. But I do have a question on the north and south exteriors elevations, is that there's, well, particularly on the north side, that there is an elevation drop. And so, obviously this is a preliminary schematic, but how are you thinking about, because you get quite a bit more facade reveal when you get east along Elm, and just, how you're thinking about that. And secondly, I would be really interested that, we talk about the Tudor character of that village, of that section of the village. And of course, Tudor is difficult to replicate, so I would be really interested in having you describe, when you think about Tudor, how do you think about that in terms of building something in that context or designing something in that context? So that's 2 separate questions.
Sure. In terms of grade change, we usually handle that, at the retail level. Obviously, we set a datum at level 2 essentially, and we'll just work it into our facade, into our retail. I mean, right now the ground floor is broken up enough into enough different retail spaces that we'll just work the grade change into the height of the ground floor. So I mean, essentially, if you imagine all those slabs will step, as you work with the grade change. I mean, that's really the prominent way we deal with that.
Okay.
I'll be 100% honest on your Tudor question. I am
Yeah.
not 100% not a Tudor historian, so I don't want to, make any claims to be a specialist in that. And John Majewski could probably speak much better to it than I could. But when I think Tudor, I think personally I think stone or brick base with well-detailed kind of entry details. I think timber and stucco elements. I think highly pitched gable roofs, and I think dormer elements. And those are the elements we try to capture into the design. And it's not. I would say it's not historically accurate, but it is an interpretation of it that we think is, we think is successful in interpreting that.
Great. Others?
Sure. Thanks for coming back with a plan that you're presenting that really meets the zoning ordinance, and you took it totally to also meet design review guidelines. So I know it says that the Tudor style has got to be the Tudor style, but it might be something you can play with and maybe come up with a better idea or something else. Not against this, but
Yeah.
I know that's your purpose of coming here tonight, was to really follow the guidelines.
Yep.
So I'm saying maybe you can move out of those guidelines a little bit. It wouldn't bother me.
Yep.
I have a lot of questions, not in any particular order other than when they came up. Can you go to this first floor, the entry level where the visitors would come in? That little parking area?
We're just asking questions right now, right? Yeah.
I think one more maybe.
Almost there.
Two more.
One more. I know what you're going to ask.
There's
Can you use the hot tub? Is that the question?
Yeah. Where is actually like the entrance lobby?
it's the yellow box. It's off of Lincoln.
Okay.
The pedestrian lobby.
Right where it says lobby. Okay, sorry. Okay. All right, good. All right, thanks. And then the commercial trash is also off of Lincoln with the dotted area.
Yeah. The commercial trash would be accessed off the loading
Right, okay.
dock.
Good, okay. Any changes to commuter parking planned in your proposal, like along Lincoln or whatever?
I don't believe we are impacting the parking I mean, essentially where our curb cuts lie or where the existing curb cuts are on site, so I don't believe we're impacting the parking at all that's on Lincoln.
How is stormwater addressed?
I mean, it's not addressed in this proposal, but we'll follow all, I believe it's MWRD guidelines for stormwater detention and village guidelines
Okay.
for that.
As we bring on more engineers, as we evolve the process.
Right, but probably someplace in the garage you've taken up spaces maybe or some,
Yeah, under the ramps,
Pro-
typical spot for
Yeah.
it.
right, okay. All right, good. Obviously, more units, smaller units. I know you guys do the student housing type thing. How does that marketing fit into Winnetka?
So CA is known for their student housing across the country. Here we're working on a project in Arlington Heights right now. We finished up a couple downtown. So we have a residential portfolio and a team that operates that. So,
Okay.
what's a little different about this, we also owner and operator. So we have that feedback loop with our operations team to make sure, we're addressing all these concerns and it gets followed through the process and it's not a handoff or anything like
Right.
that. So any promises we make here, we make sure those follow through with the development.
Okay.
So.
And is Arlington Heights similar sized units as you planning to do here?
I'd say it's a wrap style, so it's a precast parking lot. It's a pretty different type project.
Size-wise though, as far as unit sizes?
It's a larger project. It's a two-phase project as well.
Yeah.
Actual unit sizes, sorry.
Unit sizes? Yeah, they're a little larger sizes.
Arlington Heights is?
Arlington Heights. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'd have to get back to you with more.
Okay, I guess, okay. Anticipated age group of who would live here, any thoughts?
So we've done some demographic surveys. So it's kind of a mix of younger professionals that are trying to make the transition out in this area. So kind of that transition point. Also the empty nester that still wants a connection to the neighborhood and friends. Quite
Okay.
a few different ones.
All right, good. might surprise you, my opinion, the first floor retail is, I think, 13 feet. I would almost look at increasing that a little bit more for a little bit better first floor retail experience. If it even caused you going higher than the 45, wouldn't personally bother me, but just a thought to think about. Because if you go a foot or two more, you're not adding floors, but you're really gaining a better maybe retail space.
Yeah.
And then your building height of the 45 feet you measured, is that median point of that,
We'll come back with comments.
of the grade, or where's that measured from?
I believe it's to the high point of the flat roof.
There's a section. If you want.
Yeah.
I pointed a flat roof to what part of the site, though? Like we were talking, it goes downhill a little.
Sure.
Maybe David has the answer.
Yeah, so where we would measure it, as we did with the one Winnetka property, is from a point on Lincoln Avenue, the midpoint of the building. And so height is measured midpoint along the building face, so height is measured from that point.
Okay.
So as with the one Winnetka project on the Elm Street size, which Penny was, trustee Lanfear was talking about, as it decreases over there, more of the facade is exposed, but in
Agreed.
terms of measuring our height is measured from this point on Lincoln.
Again, it's going back a foot or two here or there, to me, it doesn't really make a big difference. Not dwindling, not going back to the old project, what public benefits are there, if any? There really is no public benefit on this one, because there's no additional parking or commuter parking.
No, I mean, it's pretty similar in terms of streetscape improvements and improvements to,
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think what I was reading today was the streetscape is adjacent to your property. Are you still planning to go across the street too? I think the original plan was to streetscape both sides of Elm, for instance.
No, that doesn't.
You're just doing the adjacent half the street? Okay.
May I ask what was the intention? Sorry.
Raise that mic up about an inch or so, that might help.
There you go.
Upwards.
What was the intention of going across Elm?
I think the original one, Winnetka, again, from a public benefit standpoint, you were doing this, or the streetscape was the entire street, both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're saying it's only going to be half the side. I just want to be clear on that.
Yep.
Okay.
That's our intention.
Status of Connie's, it looks like you guys are almost co-developing at this point, because Connie's is kind of listed in the ownership as a separate name, or how's that working?
They're not part of the development team.
You have ownership of the property yet?
No.
Okay.
The contract gives them till June of 2020 to close on the property.
Okay.
So they're contract purchasers at this point in time.
Okay.
Correct.
So on Lincoln, I guess it'd be the west side. Older plan kind of reduced the drive width of Lincoln, because it's really wide right there. You'll probably anticipate just keeping it the way it is as far as the Lincoln Avenue goes.
I don't think so.
yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Yep.
I know you talked about materials. What's the construction type of the building? Is it masonry, brick and block? Is it stick built, or what are you thinking?
It would be a podium.
Yeah, it'd either be a concrete or steel and concrete podium with stick-built
Okay.
wood frame above, yep.
The option 4 of the upper setbacks, my opinion, that's okay with me, just to give you some guide on that. The corner rendering, architecturally, to me, looks like a renovated warehouse.
We're going to take just to questions right now, John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll come
Okay.
back
All right,
and
good.
comment
Okay. All right.
On the
All right.
design later.
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Jack, do you have any questions? No questions? I have one question. The alternate, you show a finial in the hand sketch, and something a little bit more elevated, but in the computer renderings, you're not showing anything. It's just sort of a truncated roof. What is the intention of that particular alternate?
I believe we were just trying to limit the amount of height and exceptions we would need. I think we like the finial. especially on the corner element. I mean, we would certainly entertain that moving forward.
So, I mean, there wasn't any reason to leave it off the computer generators, except for the fact that, yeah, there you go. It was just a matter of a height consideration.
Correct, yes.
And a variance relative to the underlying zoning. I don't know.
Right,
That's David.
right,
David
yeah,
says no,
yeah,
so,
Yeah.
okay.
Chris, I have a couple more questions.
Go ahead, Penny.
One is following up on the question about the, who your target market is. I'm sorry, if you can talk a little bit more about how you're determining what the demand is for the units, and, you know, how you're looking at that. Obviously, this is more units in one building than we have anywhere in the village, and so it's an interesting opportunity and something completely new for us.
So that comes from our operations and marketing team. They kind of do a holistic study of data points and different demographics, and so they kind of take that, work with our other teams, and we kind of work out a mix, and with that, it's kind of an information feedback loop that we continue to go back and forth on. And so with that, you look at the potential opportunities for the site, also being near the train, and then just as the points for it, we use those and kind of generate a mix from that, kind of hitting those data points with the unit types, and that's kind of how we come up with this. And it's kind of a dance as well with we kind of have, to work within this box and work within the zoning guidelines, and so basically what fits best in there is kind of how that gets broken up.
Right, because we don't have any density regulations anymore. Is it, is there any fungibility within the space? Because, even with the 1 Eka project, over the course of the discussions, the market demands changed. Are you able to change things up as the type of demand changes? I mean, if studios don't work, can you, change the combinations that you have?
Yeah, and certainly, and that's kind of the advantage of being an owner and an operator. We have that ability to, work with our operations team. You get live input when you start leasing, even before the building's delivered, so you have those opportunities there.
Yeah.
And so with the project, obviously this being kind of the earlier brush, we've taken away the other plan. There's going to be a lot of subsequent steps as well as we're refining that and kind of digging in a little deeper.
Right, and as time goes on, because again, it's a good chunk of units, and I'm sure over time the demand will change, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we'll be interested to hear more about that as time goes on. The second question I had is relative to the envelope you're in, and thinking about, I mean, as this will be, the biggest single development in our downtown area, and how community friendly it is, in terms of how will this help us build community. And I like the notion of the big windows, and thinking about that as a way to provide activated storefronts and things like that. Looking at how your building fits on the footprint, how are you thinking about the area around the building in terms of the sidewalks and all of that relative to developing public use and opportunities for your retail owners to use, to spill out into the public way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So, active storefront, absolutely. That's why we have our lobby down there. So from day one, you kind of have a tenant already there, and you're already activating that space a bit. As far as the streetscape goes, we kind of look for the guidance of the city on that. As far as how that interaction is, obviously there's larger plans for it, and we want to be in the context of that. So we don't tend to drive that. We look for guidance on that.
Okay, and just, again, looking at the footprint, it looks like you've got a skinny little sidewalk along Lincoln, but that can be changed, or is that where you're thinking relative to the footprint of the building, you're not going to have much room for a sidewalk there?
Well, I believe that would be past our property line, so it wouldn't be our
Okay.
determination.
So you're building up.
We'd be willing to work with the city on what the best approach to that is. If there's, if we're trying to have more retail and kind of cafe style in some portions and have a little wider streetscape, we'd be.
So that's up for conversation?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Great. Jack, anything pop in while you were? Okay, awesome. All right, well, what I'd like to do now is open up the microphone to members of the community to share their thoughts. Before I do, I'd like to look at this as a new process that we're engaging in with this whole PD commission and the way our process works. So it might be a little different than, well, it is a little different than anybody's experienced here in town. Tonight's conversation is strictly on the concept of the development. I'll be the first to acknowledge that there are a lot of other questions relative to the status of the property, relative to the foreclosure, relative to the participation of Connie's, relative to, you know, David Trandel's continued involvement in this project. But this isn't the forum to ask or answer those questions. We're strictly trying to give this applicant some guidance and direction on whether the concept of the development that we're being presented with tonight is consistent with what the community's vision of the property is. So I'd appreciate it, and I'll make a promise to the community that this will not enter any formal process, the formal plan development process, until all those questions, those legal and those participant questions, are fully vetted and answered to our satisfaction. You know, clearly, this is, I'm sitting here thinking, this is CA Ventures' fourth iteration. We had several from Mr. Trandel prior to this, and New Trier Partners had two. So we're like on version 8 or 9 of this project. And certainly, you know, there's a strong desire in the public to see a good development go here. So I just want to set those ground rules. We're here to provide guidance, opinion, direction relative to concept, relative to program, relative to design, relative to architecture. And everyone just needs to trust us that when it comes down to drilling down into the legal aspects and the ownership aspects of this development, if it does go forward, that we'll be front and center on those things and have the answers at that time. So with that said, I'll open up the microphone. Would anybody like to speak on this issue? We'll start in the front. Anybody in the front portion here? Come on up, Ron. 3 minutes, please. I'll try. Okay, please.
Of course, I've been an advocate for the design motif for Winnetka has always been English Tudor, and I don't think we're there. You know, the street facades, but you have an interesting opportunity with this new development, and I think we have seen it at up there in Lake Forest at their Deer Path Inn. And you can go down, you can look down, you know, into the well, and across a very nice small garden. There's a stag reposed, and on the other side of that wall is parking garage for the condominiums. But you look up and you see very nice interior, English Tudor, with a lot of, you know, Cotswold stone, you know, corner facings. And I think from here, we can call it the Indian Trail at Winnetka. You probably have some flats of short-term rentals. You probably have access to a good kitchen, where you could, you know, serve decent meals down there. Probably a bar, and probably maybe even some beautiful statuary, a water fountain, ballerina. They come from Dresden in Germany. Beautiful work, but you know, that's $100,000 line item in the budget. But, and for that, you would want an enclosed atrium and an access perpendicular to Elm, and, which would sort of, give you a separate west building. But I think you would also like to have what the Fell building has now, and that is that angle, square up to the property on the south, and you have a summer place for, tables, exterior, large glass, atrium door, which would actually be the pass-through going on all the way to Elm Street. I think it's something that should be used in your design criteria. Give it a try, and I think the citizens of Winnetka will appreciate the effort. Activities in the commercial building. Hey, we need a good bicycle shop, and it's a good place for kids to get after school doing their fix-it shop. We haven't had a good fix-it shop since, I guess, Taylor closed down, 10, 15 years ago? But those are some of the things which would be, the user activities. We can talk about it later. But anyway, you back my time.
Thanks, Ron. Let's move to the second row. Does anybody?
How much time did I use?
Oh, 4 minutes and, no, actually 3:25, Ron. You were right on the button. Anybody else in that row? The next row, I'm horrible with row numbers. Come on up. You're getting your money's worth tonight, Ben.
This was the main reason I came. The other one just happened to be a question that came up. So my name, Vince D'Amico, 475 Poplar. Guys, I love what you're doing over here. I have a quick question. On the second floor where you've got the spa or you've got the hot tub and the amenities, the rooms on that floor, how do you access that? Is there an interior hallway? And are they facing out kind of like a patio onto that open area?
Not fully programmed yet, but usually there's a little patio area that have landscape around it, so it's kind of private, but still they can look over the amenities.
Okay, but it would be on the same deck level, which would be a nice amenity, a nice open-air space. All right, on that first floor, we have the pass-through that's proposed going from Elm to Lincoln, and you're going to have that one little pie-shaped piece that's facing the hard corner. Are you thinking about having cafe windows on the inside of that larger hallway access to present kind of more of a French little chateau or, little bistro type of thing where you've got now windows all the way around?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely don't want it enclosed. So yeah, I mean, definitely try to open up that passage.
Yeah, if you could do something to get a little bit more light, I think that'll be an appealing thing for a retailer to be on that little hard corner too. So anyway, my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening. My name's John Phelan. I'm a resident at 711 Oak Street. I'm the property immediately south of the area under consideration this evening. I'm also the president of the Condo Association for the building, and I'm here this evening to speak on behalf of the Board of Managers for 711 Oak. On December 17th, 2019, the board and one of our residents met with John Majewski, the architect for the proposed structure, and with Ryan Sadawi, the representative of CA Ventures, who is here this evening. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss the plans for the property while at the same time being able to provide input on what might eventually become a neighboring structure. At that December meeting, we were shown the plans as they were then, and we provided our concerns about the proposed plans. One concern we had was the lack of a setback along the north property line. The plans as presented this evening address that concern, as they now show a 25-foot setback along the southern edge of the proposed property development adjacent to our north property line. We appreciate being heard on that issue and the proposed changes that ensued. However, there are other areas where we have concerns with the proposed layout of the property. Both the garage entry to the proposed structure and the loading dock entrance for the building are facing Lincoln Avenue, just north of the 711 Oak Street property, at the 25-foot setback line. In fact, the driveway is the setback. So as it takes up almost the entire width of the 25-foot setback area. So while we got our wish to move the building further north of our property line, we now have vehicular traffic for 158 parking spaces immediately adjacent to our driveway and property line. In addition, the loading dock entrance meets the driveway at the southwest corner of the proposed building. So we have not only residential traffic there, we have delivery trucks, trash trucks, and recycling trucks coming and going out onto Lincoln Avenue at the same location. More than likely, an accident waiting to happen. We also have concerns about the density of the proposed development. At 90 units and 158 parking spaces, we can expect upwards of 200 people living in the building at full occupancy. For a downtown Winnetka location, that density is very high and will lead to a fair amount of congestion on the streets and sidewalks around the property and in the area in general. Please don't misunderstand. The 711 Oak Street property owners are not against any and all development of the parcel. We have had to live with the eyesore that is there for way too long. It's an embarrassment to the village and a cause for concern for all who live nearby. We want a healthy, vibrant neighborhood with developments that fit the area and add to the enjoyable life in Winnetka. The village website says, quote, "The village is made up of tranquil, tree-shaded streets and family-oriented neighborhoods," end quote. Let's keep it that way and work toward a development that supports that vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Frank. You get your trunk closed?
Pardon me? Yeah, I did. Thank you. Frank Petrick, 711 Oak Street, next door neighbor to the project. I don't want to repeat anything that our president, John Phelan, covered. I do want to point out, I've been living in the building longer than John, so I'm setting a record for suffering.
You don't want to get in the middle of anything.
Now with our Block 37 here. But what I did want to touch on is the point that John made, and I think it's instructive. But if you go to page 78 of your agenda packets tonight, which is it's option 4, it's the sketch at grade, and you could really visualize the point that he's making about that is John Phelan made about 3 driveways converging. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner of that drawing, one thing that's very, very clear and jumps out at you is that you've got a whole string of retail on Elm Street, and you could we met John Masevsky, and I was there. I was the non-board member that met with the architect and Ryan in December, and he has been responsive to our comments. It was a very productive meeting, obviously, but you could flip this loading out to any one of 3 or 4 of the retail spaces on Elm Street without compromising a loss of rental space. You still have an ability to cut an entryway into that the parking area for trash, et cetera, if it's necessary, and it would really make the entire situation much safer. And if you just want to go by comparison, our building was built in about 1980, 711 Oak. The entrance to our parking lot is off Lincoln. The entrance to our building is off of Oak. So we've got 2 entrances that service a building that's a smaller building on a smaller parcel of land. And I think it's doable. And I think that would make a huge difference for safety and for the benefit, including the people that are going to live in this building. And I did want to touch on Trustee Lamper's comment, Penny. I know there was a change in the density provisions, but you're going from a building where the concept of the number of units in this development for the last 8 years has been somewhere between 35 and 60 when it got down to approval time. So you're going 30% bigger on density. I believe there are 13 studios prepared in the drawings that we have here. We've got a daughter who's a attorney in town, and she's in a studio right now, and she's looking forward to getting a one-bedroom, and she's living there alone. So my point about that is I don't think you're going to attract, with all due respect to conversations, sounds more like spitballing than actually going out and doing a formal survey about potential demographics. I don't see a big influx of singles coming to Winnetka. I mean, we've got, Ricky's is great nightlife, but I think we're all past what the kids are doing. So I would respectfully request that this be downsized a little bit, and I think that would go over very well. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Frank.
Hey, Frank, I'm sorry. Can I just ask you to repeat in terms of what would you have flipped over to the Oak Street, to the Elm Street side?
Okay, sure.
Thanks. I just want to make sure I got it right.
Can I?
Let me put up the image.
Sure. Thanks, David. It's page 78.
I mean, Elm.
Yeah. What does he want flipped from Oak to Elm?
Okay.
Driveway.
Probably the parking garage entry. Too bad Bob's not
Okay,
here.
there you go. You see right over, you see if you go right where David's got the cursor? So that's the entry to the garbage and the delivery.
Right.
And if you move the cursor over to Elm Street, you could take any of those four retail units and have your entry and delivery there for delivery for the retail and the restaurants, as well as the garbage pickup, and you'd still have the residents coming in and out without being on top of delivery trucks and garbage trucks.
Okay.
That was the point there.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, welcome, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else in that row? I can't see much back here. Moving back, anybody in the next row? Come on up. Help me out here. I can't see that far, so.
Well, I'd like to save some time. I mixed up. Nancy Fox, you had a slide that looked like, I don't know the building. Could you go back to the slide that has just the train-looking building?
The old one?
That shows the architecture that,
A sketch?
yes, thank you. So is this project just that, what I see, or does it continue down toward Fell? And, is that phototronics up at the top, at the front, where you want to put the tower, the clock tower?
Yes.
And now, this is the building. It's just one train, right? Going that angle down Elm? Yes, sir. Okay, good. Well, I like that idea, because the reason is, I like the angle like that when I think of what's around, because just to the northwest is the bank building, which is colonial, with a big gable that just kind of goes beeline right for phototronics. And then on the other side of the street, which is parallel with Green Bay, you have Harris Bank, which is a big, fancy, modern atrium with a colonial sort of matching. Well, it just doesn't match. Anyway, I like the setup of the angles. I wouldn't be able to tell you that that's Tudor or Gothic because I see no detail. I'd appreciate a detailed, intimate close-up of the first section, which looks extremely abstracted. This middle section, which maybe is where your timber is. I don't know where you've put timber. I don't know if it's half timber, I don't know the color, I don't know. If I were to judge this building, I would have thought that this is, well, I wouldn't call it Tudor. And so we need, I think we need more than just an expression of what you're presenting. We need a very detailed study of different aspects, and then I'd understand what we're supposed to understand.
Sure. Yeah, Nancy, if they go to the next phase, we'll be seeing.
Oh, you would?
Yeah, we'll definitely be.
Oh,
seeing
so that wasn't the purpose for tonight.
No,
Sorry.
just very big concept, more big picture stuff. That's okay. It's all helpful. Anybody else in that row? All right, the rest of the room. Can I see hands for who'd like to speak? Come on up, Mark. Oops. While Mark is on the way up, I want to identify him. He was recognized this weekend for being a snow angel and helping out his elderly neighbor and shoveling him out when he was struggling with that problem in the alley. Thank you, Mark.
Flattery will get you everywhere. Thank you very much for your remarks about the other issues. I had remarks to make on those. They're tabled for tonight.
Thank you.
With regard to this particular conception of what goes there, I think the very brief remarks from the fellows at 711 Oak are on target. And forgive me, but this looks like high-class student housing. And I think that, I know that the trustees will be under pressure from many, many residents who are terribly, terribly anxious to get something done there and are ready to say, I don't care what it is. But what is built will be there long after all of us have gone away, hopefully to better pastures. And I think that the point that the folks from 711 made about additional density should be taken into consideration. And at this stage, or at any stage, I think the trustees should just give a flat no to anything that will increase density in that area the way a structure with this many apartments will. Ordinarily, I'm a free market guy, and I'd say to folks, if you want to put your money down and roll the dice, go ahead. But this is going to affect Winnetka for many, many, many years. I think this is out of character with Winnetka, and I think rather than, even if it were to get built conceptually like this with a lot of small apartments, it will, if it's successful and if it brings in people, it will completely ruin the West Elm Business District because of the people coming in and out and using cars. And people living in this area are going to be using cars. The idea of transit-oriented development, which is where this thing started back in 2007 with New Trier Partners, is one which simply does not work for a suburban town like this one. And I can tell you that as a matter of personal experience, not conjecture, because I walk around and I do not use a car in Winnetka to the extent I'm able, and I do take public transit into and out of Chicago. But it is simply a mistake to think that because this is next to a train station, that people will not be using cars very much. Thank you. Those are my remarks.
Thanks, Mark. Next, anybody else wish to speak? Last call? Okay, we'll close public comment, and now we'll bring it up here. And Jack, you've been awful quiet tonight, so I'm going to let you lead things off. Why don't you share your thoughts with us? Mike.
I think that the density, it's going to be the same problem that Trandell had, which was he started off with all those units, and the commentary that most people said is people in Winnetka don't want things that are that small. If somebody's downsizing, they don't want to go down to a one bedroom because they have so much stuff they've accumulated, they need more space. But I don't know that we need to necessarily address that at our level, because I think that they'll have to make that decision as they look at the market. They may look at what's going on at the Wilmette train station across the street from that and go, we got to, what are we going to need to do to make this building saleable in terms of its interior? How do we come up with the right mix of units and the right sizes? And then the price is also going to be controlling. The price of the, under Trandell's things were as much as mortgages payments were. So there's going to be a limit. And I think that one of the comments was, I can't see a lot of young people moving into these places, into taking studios and one bedrooms. I think that's probably correct. But there may be people, snowbirds who go down to Florida but want to keep something up here. I don't know. I think the idea of providing a more high-density building to answer the problem of where do people go when they move out of their houses in Winnetka is important, because right now the options are very limited. If you can't live in a bigger house, you're out. And so you can't stay in the community even if you want to. So I like that. I also like the fact that they've talked to everybody. All the people who the first group, One Winnetka, didn't talk to before they did a plan. These guys seem to be making every attempt to talk to them to try to answer their questions. And I think that's super, super important for coming up with a development that's appropriate and acceptable to the community, and also reflects the community's values and sort of aesthetic desires. The building, I like alternative for option 4, the alternative with the tower, because that sort of has a reflection across the train tracks at the Chase Bank, with its tower there, and then there's Village Hall that has a clock tower too. So I like that. I think that's a good way to pick up bits and pieces of the village and to reflect it in the building. The brick section looks like it's trying to pick up the township building and then the Eckert's building down the street a little bit. So I think they're trying to reflect that. And then I like the Tudor. I liked it. When I saw this, I thought, wow, they're trying to answer the issues that all the other attempted developments at this spot have run against. And they're trying to come up with something where they're really listening. They're going, okay, one of the criticisms is that the prior development was French, I don't want to say colonial. Beaux-Arts. And that wasn't Winnetka. And it's true. I didn't like it because it wasn't Winnetka. It didn't reflect it. I think this is an interesting building. And again, I think that they're doing the right thing. Again, I think the density will work itself out, because I think they're going to have to work it out to be able to sell. But I like the way that it looks. I think that it's going to answer a lot of the issues that people had with the prior project. It's smaller, lower. It's not going to be looming when you look up from Village Green, when you look west towards the village. Trandell's project was monstrous. It would have been, as they said at their first meeting, we want you to see it from Milwaukee. This isn't going to be that project. It's not going to be one where people go, you know what Winnetka's known for? The biggest Beaux-Arts building in the entire North Shore. I think that this is respectful of the massing within the village. It's going to be big, and that's what they're looking to do, but it's not 5 stories, it's not 7 stories, and it's not completely out of character to the village. So I'm positively disposed toward it right now.
Great. Thanks, Jay. John?
Sure. I guess questions going forward or comments to maybe help further on design if you choose to go ahead. Like I talked earlier, in my opinion, if you have to go a foot or two higher to get a better retail space, it'll give you more of a restaurant area, allow some horizontal ductwork not to shorten your ceilings up or things like that, that would not be a big deal to me. Just do not go to another whole story building. I think it was a good comment of one of the 7-Eleven Oak. Try to get access off of Lincoln. If you look at the plan, you might be able to swap the trash area for the driveway and maybe put the trash along the property line where the setback is, but not the whole, doesn't have to be the whole depth. It could be in a brick enclosure or something with an overhead door facing Lincoln. So I would take a look at that. As you go forward, take a look at HVAC systems. Make sure that we don't have a bunch of HVAC louvers at every one of these units, at a window or below a window or something like that. Hate to have that come back and haunt you. I mentioned architecturally, you really tried to stick to the whole design review guidelines. I'd be a little more flexible if you choose to go a different route. I started to mention that corner where Phototronics is really does look like a renovated warehouse. So that's just my first opinion. I do like the finial on the top. That helped out somewhat, but take a look at that. As you go forward with these smaller units in the garages, it'd be nice to have a 5x10 or some kind of storage for the units that they can put stuff downstairs, a bicycle, golf clubs, whatever they want to put down there, without having to go rent out a storage place someplace else. I counted, I think there's only 10 studios. I could be wrong in the number. That's about right, probably. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but considering there's 90 units, that's probably not the end of the world. A lot of them are still 1 and 2 bedrooms. So, again, if that turns out to be an issue as you start leasing, you're going to make some 2 bedrooms out of the studio into 1, maybe, if that turns out that way. I would like to see both sides of the public right-of-way get done for the streetscape, because that's kind of been in the whole planning process. I think that's it, but thanks.
Penny?
Yeah, let's see. First of all, I'm also speaking, channeling Bob Dearborn a little bit tonight because he's not here. So I try to think of what he would say if I'm sitting in his seat. So as somebody who I know was thoughtful about, the residents off of Elm Street, and I'm sure he would say that he likes the fact, and actually I think I also like the fact that the traffic is on Lincoln, which has less neighborhood traffic than on Elm Street. And I know, I feel sure that the neighbors down on Arborvitae and Elm would take exception to having the loading dock down on the northeastern corner, right? I think your idea maybe of flip-flopping, we need to think about obviously how it all works out best, but where we can put the traffic flow with the least impact. And I think that this proposal, I feel much more comfortable with just in general in terms of the traffic flow on the site. So that is one area definitely to think about. Secondly, the density, of course, is going to be a tricky thing. 90 units certainly is a significant amount for our village, and we'll be looking clearly for more market research and trying to determine what is appropriate for this village, because TOD, while the world hopefully is moving towards fewer cars, I don't think we're there yet, particularly in a suburban environment. So while we would love to be able to encourage people to use public transportation, I think realistically we're not there yet where we're really going to be slimming down on automobile usage. Also in terms of even if we do have units for people who are downsizing, what does that mean in terms of square footage? All those kinds of things. We are a different community than some of the other ones that you've done business in. So I think we will be looking to hear support for what type of units you'll be proposing, because we have as much vested interest in making sure that your project works as you do. So I think it'll be great. And certainly there's I'm interrupting myself, sorry. I think there's been a lot of conversation going on in the village, particularly as we're embarking on the comprehensive plan process about what is the appropriate density for the village. You are staying within the footprint and, the height density, the height limitation, so that's kind of limiting our conversation right there. So I think that's a useful starting point. But it will need to be carefully thought out because it is a hot point for our community to be sure, thoughtfully, and that our capital infrastructure as a village can handle the additional volume. But it would be great to have more people in to support our downtown area. Thirdly, and I know Bob expressed, we had a conversation over the weekend, and he also was very interested, obviously, in the devil is in the details relative to design and design materials. The context in that neighborhood is Tudor. Tudor is complicated to replicate authentically, and certainly we have some examples in the village of more recent efforts to stay within the Tudor style that have not been so successful, I think, stylistically. So I was very serious when I asked the question about what do you think of when you think of Tudor design? What makes that so relevant for our village? And I think a large part of what makes it suitable for a village that wants to retain sort of the intimate scale is the massing, how the doorways are treated individually, that they become very attractive spaces that you want to go into, and that there is real character at the street level as well as above. Similarly, as you look around our village, that we don't have, we really don't have any building facades that stretch for anything more than really like a quarter of a block. And you may have buildings that are larger than that, but the mass is broken up with, stylistically. So I think in order to be a successful Tudor treatment, I think there needs to be some thought about what does that mean in our context and how does that break up the facade so it becomes, even though it is one building project, how does it maintain that feel of being something local? And hopefully that's something that can be addressed thoughtfully without being expensive, but just approaching it thoughtfully. I like your thoughts about articulation, and when you speak of punched windows, I don't know how that will affect the notion of depth and shadow play, but again, with our building circa 1910, 1920, there is a lot of depth and character to those facades that I think do go a long way to making those buildings feeling like there's some character. Obviously, we're not, building construction is different, so it needs to be discussed in a different way, but I think those are some of the elements that make it feel good. Unlike John, I'm not put off necessarily by the different treatment of the brick. I like the way that you've integrated the brick and the stucco, because we have lots of both in the village. And putting a contemporary swing on things is not necessarily a bad thing at all. You can do it with character and style, and it can come off well. So sometimes in terms of replicating, exactly, maybe bringing it with a different style, but incorporating the fundamental elements that are important to the rhythm could be done. So I think we've got something to talk about here, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you've come to us. But fundamentally, for me, as you start this, I just want to make sure that we continue to have a building that reflects the elements of community character that we want to retain. And, maybe we can think about something a little different as we talk about it, but it's that street level friendliness and inviting people to participate and to come in and to have visual interest is just so important. So thank you.
If I could feed off of one of Penny's comments, that this is like one of the longer buildings in Winnetka as a brand new development. One thing to look at, and maybe might call me crazy, it doesn't have to look like all the same building.
Right.
You can make it look like it was 4 separate buildings with little different styles, even though it's all the same inside.
Right.
So just a thought, or not have the whole base all limestone, have some other stone come down or some brick, So at least it's like, oh, which door are you at? Well, let me count how many stones I have to go down. It could just be a little different entrance to some retail too. So that could
Yeah.
possibly help also.
Visual interest, right?
Great, thanks.
Okay. I'll close up conversation here. I really only have a couple observations at this point on the concept. The corner of Lincoln and Elm is really important, and it's important to have a strong but not shocking architectural element anchoring that corner. I think with the that option 4A or whatever you call it, you're kind of heading down the right place, but that's a really, really, really important piece to this whole puzzle, is to make sure that that corner is anchored and appropriately expressed. It looks like you were thinking about it, and thank goodness we got rid of that stupid rotunda. I mean, I've done that thing 10 times already, and I'm sick of it just because I've done it everywhere else, and I think we deserve something a little bit more interesting than that. Looks like you guys are on the right path with that corner, but I think you got to just, aesthetically, you just have to think it through a little bit more and maybe make it a little bit more less disjointed and something that really speaks to the community aesthetic. I'm not a big fan of Tudor. I'm gonna stay away from that because I know some people really worship at that altar and believe it's a defining characteristic of our community. Yeah, I see it all over the place. Penny, you're right. There's some good expressions of it, and there's some really not so good ones.
Yeah, we'd rather not do it if we're going to do it badly.
I think as architecture evolves, taking cues and nodding to it and integrating elements that would lead you to think of it and maybe not smack you in the face might not be so bad. But again, I know you've got a lot of people to please in an architectural review board that's sensitive to that. Relative to the site issues, I'm not opening the door to this, but I'm encouraging creative thought relative to other opportunities to access the building, and I'm thinking specifically, of the parking lot to the east. I know you guys don't want to get into a community, what do we call that benefit?
Public benefit?
Public benefit, where, we pick your pockets for, $4 million in streetscaping just to get an access point off the east. But you might, I encourage you to think creatively, hearing 7-Eleven's concerns, you might not be able to address them. We have one trustee that if he saw an outlet onto Elm Street, he'd be really upset with it. But you've heard other trustees that are completely fine with the way it's laying out now. So you have to think in that manner. And I just want to leave the door open that if there is something really creative, sensitive, it makes sense and it makes the building better, not just because it's easier, cheaper, and you can get a couple more units out of the deal, but it really works on all levels. I'd like to think we're open to that sort of thing. We just because the last project went so horribly bad doesn't mean that we're not workable and approachable and want to be good partners in a really important development. We're not going to get in bed with you. We're not going to give away the farm. But we certainly want to send a message that we are open and willing to listen. And I can see that, Ryan, with you here, that you're listening, which is something we haven't seen much from that team ever. So I'm glad to see you at the podium, and I could tell you're actually absorbing what people are saying, and you've given some thought to what you've done there. The density is what it is. Mark, I'm a free market guy too, and one thing I know about the village is we are not in the business of ensuring people's profitability. It's your nickel. You know, I wonder about some of the financial issues, but, you know, certainly those are questions we'll talk about another day. I mean, regretfully, you know, Trandell stood at that podium and announced to everybody that he had $32 million sunk in the project, and, you know, $335,000 a unit for land scares me. And certainly, I know you guys are working behind the scenes to get that to a workable number so a project like this can work. But that's going to be a key piece to this because, you know, without a sensible valuation and land cost component, this will never get built either. And, you know, we all know that. So, but that's a conversation for another day and information that we'll be vetting as we go through this process, if indeed you elect to go forward. And that's it. So I want to thank everybody for engaging in the conversation tonight. I think it's really important to share these sorts of things and understand that, you know, we're all just people with our own opinions, and you know, applicants such as CA Ventures, you know, have had an opportunity to hear what we have to say. They can choose to listen to it. They can choose to ignore it. But at least they've heard us, and hopefully this sort of conversation helps shape a potential development that we can all be really proud of. So with that, I'll close this issue and we'll move forward in our agenda. Thanks again, guys. And I lost my agenda. Hold on. Oh, welcome back, Andy.
Hey.
And just so everybody knows, I'm forfeiting the part of my pay proportionate with.
Sounds good.
So you only miss $1 today.
Okay. Item 11, appointments. I have one appointment this evening. May I have a motion to appoint Mike Nielsen from the zoning Board of Appeals for a full term? Just to add, Mike has been serving on the Environmental and Forestry Commission for several years. He's been an active member there. He's a good thinker, and he's got a lot of interesting ideas and a good background in real estate related matters, and I think he'd be a really good addition to that commission. So can I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Item 12, closed session. There is none. And finally, adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Second.
Do we have a second there? Second. Okay. May I voice vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you. Yes.
Well, I had a feeling it was a help.
Can you find it for me?
It was not like Fred, so it wasn't like dropping of a heart attack.
Poor guy.
Oh.